everyone, and welcome to Food for Life this week. I'm Ashley Tresleen, and I am your host. Now, some of you know me, and some of you don't. It's a new year, so some of you are finding the show on E360, and some of you have been loyal viewers. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself before I introduce our lovely and talented guest that we have today. I can't wait to hear her story and watch her make something so yummy that I'm practically drooling over her showing me the final dishes. Now, I own a company called Bella Foodie, which, that's based on my Italian heritage, and a foodie is what I am. I've grown up Italian my whole life on both sides, and that's where my love of food comes from. I'm a personal chef by trade and food educator. I love to help my clients stay healthy from the inside out, whether it be through food or education or teaching kids how to cook at an early age so that they start enjoying vegetables before, they start hating them, right? Anything we can do to help the kids out. I also have my own coffee brand that I launched in the beginning of the summer. So check that out. It's on my website. And there's so much more to learn about me, but hopefully you guys will tune in next week. Here's my website. You'll tune in next week and you'll hear more about that. But that's enough about me, y'all. You guys are here to see our guest, Meg Gerber. She's a functional dietitian. Now, I know we've had functional practitioners on the show, but we've never had a functional dietitian. And I'm so excited to welcome her. So let's welcome her, everyone. Hi, Meg. How are you?
Hi, Ashley. Thank you for having me. So great to be here.
I'm so excited to have you on. Now, as I said, we've had functional practitioners before, and we'll get to that, what a functional dietitian is. But why don't you tell our viewers who you are in your own words and a little bit about yourself? Anything you want to tell us.
Okay, I'm a dietitian. I'm a fellow foodie like you are, total food lover. I live in Austin, Texas. I am an auntie. I am also a yogi and I would say breath work enthusiast. I absolutely love breath work and just committing to stillness and regulating the nervous system. That is definitely a passion point of mine. And I love to be outside, love nature.
Wow. I mean, is it even possible to be outside in Texas right now?
Oh yeah, it is this is a beautiful time of the year. So it's actually, we're having I think unseasonably very warm winter right now. So it's 70s, sunny, even stretching up into the 80s. It's been absolutely beautiful. I live for this and the sunshine every day.
Oh, I saw last weather report. I saw sometime last week. It was in the hundreds in certain areas of Texas.
Yeah, it gets it gets triple digits in the summer. So yeah, it totally, it can be very hot. I'm from Boston originally, and I actually left Boston for more of the warmth. I really love the warmth, the sun. So even though the triple digits is tough, I will take the heat any day over the cold.
As it's planning to snow over the weekend here.
Yeah, I know. I hate to rub it in your face.
That's okay. Totally fine. Hey, I live in New England. What am I going to do about it, right? It's that time of year. It snows. It's been a mostly mild winter, so I cannot complain. The snowblower hasn't come out yet, so I shouldn't complain.
Oh, thank God. I'm crossing my fingers for you.
Oh, I know. So, you're a functional medical dietitian. And since we've had medical practitioners on before, now you're the first one I've ever met that's a functional dietitian. And we learned what they do, but what's the difference between the two?
Yeah, so you've probably had typically functional medicine doctors is who would maybe say they're a functional medicine practitioner. Dietitians can consider themselves a practitioner as well. The difference, I would say, is a dietitian doesn't go to medical school. We go to registered dietitian school. And then what I did then after school was additional certifications in functional medicine specifically, which is the way I explain it is it's very root cause analysis focused and very holistic. So it's looking at the body as a whole. If someone comes to you with a headache, it's not necessarily just saying, okay, let's focus on the head. Let's give you anti-inflammatory, say Advil medicine to target just that. We look at that from a bigger picture of like that could be stewing and brewing from something else. And for me, so much comes back to gut health, and I really specialize in gut and autoimmune, mainly because so much comes back to that. We process our hormones through our gut. Like, we have to start there.
So now you've had issues of your own. You have your own autoimmune issues and digestive issues. Now, how far back, like when did that start from you? When did you know something was wrong and you were a little bit different than other people?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I remember growing up dealing with constipation so much of my life. Like, that was just a mainstay. And I also remember every time I would eat out, I would typically feel sick after.
Oh,
And looking back, I think a big reason was because it's so easy for gluten to trickle in when you eat out if you're
oh
not
yeah.
careful about it. And now being diagnosed with celiac, I kind of can piecemeal, like puzzle piece that together to say, okay, that's probably why I was always associating like eating out with I feel sick after. But really, things worsened a lot in college. In college, I was not treating my body well. I was in a sorority. I was drinking a lot of alcohol. I was doing like the college partying thing. And I remember dealing still with constipation, but more acid reflux than ever, ping ponging back and forth with diarrhea and just like an irritated, bloated gut. And then I studied abroad in Italy, which I'm sure I know like Italian culture has a place in your heart. And I loved Italy and it was so fun. But of course, I was partying a lot there. I was looking back, eating a lot of gluten, even though the gluten there is a little bit different than the gluten here. I was still sick a lot because that was pre-diagnosis. So I kind of just didn't know what I didn't know at that point. So when I went to get a colonoscopy and an endoscopy late college, I almost canceled the appointment because I was like, I don't think I'm a celiac. I don't eat that much gluten. And I wrote about this in my book. Just that like, I thought that my, college diet wasn't a super high gluten diet. Looking back, I think there actually was a lot of gluten in that diet. But thank God I didn't cancel it because I was positive via biopsy through an endoscopy, which really the telltale sign of celiac is looking at the small intestinal villi. You have these little finger-like projections lining your intestines, and in the small intestine specifically is where we usually see the most damage in celiac, typically in an area called the duodenum. And mine looked flattened like a mowed lawn, and that is really the telltale sign of a celiac. So I was diagnosed in 2013, so almost 13 or almost 10 years ago now. And times have definitely changed since then.
Yeah. Things have you been back to Italy since then? Because people always
I
associate it with
wish.
pasta and pizza, but different parts of Italy, like the coast is all about like marine stuff, or there's stuff where there's more vegetables focused. So
Yeah,
I
I
definitely
love
think
that you said
celiacs
that.
would eat in Italy.
Totally. I love that you said that, Ashley, because I've been jonesing to go back. I've been super curious about going back because my little sister also has celiac and she has been there as a diagnosed celiac. And she was like, it's almost easier to eat here than in the US
Oh,
because
probably.
they actually test their babies at birth for celiac and are just very aware. Like, they have gluten-free pasta readily available, gluten-free pizza crust. So she actually found it to be super, super easy. I, of course, just relish the time that I was there in college and want to be able to go back to all those same places. And I'm sure I won't be able to eat exactly the same food, obviously, but I definitely want to go back. That it's just near and dear to my heart. I studied in Florence and then I traveled around other areas of Italy.
I just want to make sure people that have any sort of issues know that there's so many other options. Like, you don't have to drink the wine, you can go travel along. I always worry about like when I travel because I have food allergies, I have an autoimmune disease, and there's certain stuff I can't eat. And I don't know about you, but like when you travel, do you feel like stressed about that too sometimes?
Good question. It's definitely something that takes planning. I mean, I talk about this with my clients. I think any of us with food allergies want to be the person who's like easy breezy. I don't have to think about anything. And you just can't. You can't just go with the flow. You have to go with your flow. And so I think it takes definitely planning ahead and kind of mapping out. And then I've also found that with travel, like I was in Mexico City last year, I had printed out and brought like a restaurant card to bring with me to the restaurants in Spanish, just to be really crystal clear, because I'm sure you know this too, like with food allergies and things like celiac, it's a totally different ball game than just like a sensitivity, which can still be difficult in its own right with travel, but celiac is just that much more strict, down to like the little 1/1000th of a slice of bread is what can affect a celiac. So down to the crumb, you have to be careful. But I've definitely chosen not to live my life in a box. Like, it's important to me that someone who's celiac shouldn't feel like I can't travel, I can't eat out. That's a quality of life that I don't choose. Like, I choose joy and choosing safety for my body too. So I think it's just about planning and how you talk to yourself through the experience, and understanding that, like, yes, it's a serious thing, but if you can bring any level of lightness or humor to a situation, it's always going to help soothe really ultimately your nervous system and your mental state, which I think is a big piece to autoimmune as well.
Yeah, and I wanna go back just a little bit. So, you realized that there was something wrong and you went through college, and what kind of symptoms you said that you experienced? Was it just the different, like, acid reflux and the digestive, like, sometimes you felt good, sometimes you didn't? What happened, like, after you were diagnosed? Because I know after my diagnosis, like, I felt relieved because it wasn't something that was going to kill me immediately, my MS, but, like, then I had all these thoughts running through my head. Like, I don't know about you,
Mm,
like, anxiety and, like, treatment and, like, "Oh my
I
god, like,
feel this
how
so
am I
much.
gonna deal with this and other people gonna deal with this?"
I think that's a really shared experience for people with autoimmune. It's yeah, things got worse for me after the diagnosis. It was like the immediate was, it felt good to be diagnosed with something, to be like, okay, the stuff that I've been feeling, the acid reflux, the constipation, the chronic stomach pain, like there's a reason for it, and I'm not crazy, because so many gastroenterologists, GI doctors tell people like, you're fine. Oh, you're not pooping every day. You're fine. Like, you have stomach pain every day. You're fine. And it makes you feel kind of quote unquote crazy,
Mm.
because you're like, something in my body's wrong. My body's giving me feedback, but everyone's telling me I'm fine and normal. So I definitely went through a similar, like, it felt good to get a diagnosis, but then the stories and the noise and the thoughts in my brain started to really, really circle. It can be debilitating, and I say that really it's not the disease per se, the diagnosis, that's the debilitating part. It's the story we create around it. It's the story of like, I'm alone, no one understands, I'm going to be isolated, no one's going to want to be with someone like me, I'm going to annoy my friends, I'm not going to be able to travel. Those were always thoughts that, those really came up for me and started to swim, and I let them swim for a while. Like, what I know now is like, you can choose differently and work to, work with your body and support your body versus fighting it, because it's really easy to choose the fighting battle and to choose victimhood. But that will sink you lower into the ground than the physical symptoms themselves.
I do think it's important after a diagnosis, though, to sit and have every feeling you have, because it's usually like for me, it was a couple of years before they decided what was actually wrong with me or
Mm,
believed there was something wrong with me, because I kept telling doctors there was something wrong with me and they kept being like, "No, you're fine." Like,
mhm,
"No, I'm definitely not fine," like you said.
mhm.
And I think it just took me a while because I was so young, and it was just like, I'm in college, we're making our 5-year plans, our 10-year plans, and now I'm like, "Now what?"
Mm,
Did
yeah.
you ever feel like that at some point, like, when you had your head swimming, like, how does this affect my future plans?
Yeah, totally, totally. And I so much of what you're sharing like really resonates for me, because I think if you don't have, someone else going through the same thing alongside you, it's hard to know like, okay, what's next for me? And it's really easy to Google stuff and be like, oh my God, this is doomsday. Like, I'm screwed. Like, it's easy to do that. And I definitely you know, want to offer a lot of grace to that person who's going through that. Because I think, to your point, we do need to like allow those feelings to be felt and processed and acknowledge them. And there's opportunity there as well to push beyond and to choose differently at a certain point in your journey.
So when was there a turning point for you when you were like, okay, this isn't working for me, even though I've now started a celiac approved diet, but my diet's not working, my mental state's not working. How do I change this? Like, why is this all not working the right way for me?
Yeah, I think for many years after, the reason like physically I felt so much worse is that the physical impact on my nervous system and my body from my brain just like creating all of these stories and ultimately creating more stress on my body. And that's something I like to talk to a lot of people about, is just like the physical implication of the mental stress, because it does have an energetic feedback on the body. And so it took me a while to get to the place of realizing that, of being like, okay, well, the textbook says eat gluten-free and you'll get better, but I'm eating gluten-free and I'm not better. So like, what am I missing here? And what I was missing is just acknowledging how deeply impactful stress is. And so, you know, the turning point for me, I talk about this a little bit in the book, was through multiple situations, really one really big climax point with one of my family members, of realizing that like I was actually just making things so much worse and pushing people away even more than I was creating in my brain by not allowing people to help me and not asking for support and feeling like I just have to do this all alone and I'm isolated and no one understands. And so when I started to peel those layers away, yes, through therapy, but ultimately my first mindset coach that I worked with was really helpful in being a mirror for me in a lot of ways, of really showing me how I was viewing my life and how a lot of it, like the story of I'm alone, for example, is a story. It doesn't have to be real unless I make it real, unless I keep spending my energy on that being like a true thing for me.
I find that sometimes, like when I was first diagnosed, I felt like all I was doing was educating my family or trying to like tell people like, no, that's not right. And thank you for this article. I appreciate it. But that's not the kind of MS I have. So, but no, thank you. Like, did you ever feel like that with your family and friends? They mean well, but it's not quite right.
Yeah, you know, I think in some capacities, yes. I think now I look at it as like, okay, people meant well and they want to support and they want to help. So, but I felt very similar to you in that, in the sense that, um, you know, I had many friends at the time saying things like, well, you know, when you drink more alcohol, for example, can't you just have gluten, or can't you just cheat? And like giving their 2 cents on like what they thought celiac was and what they thought eating gluten free was. And yeah, I think in those situations, it's really easy to be like, you just don't get it. And I'm going to figure this out on my own, which is ultimately why I wrote my cookbook, because it's really the cookbook I wish I had to give to friends, family members, partners when I was diagnosed. It's a better understanding for that person who gets diagnosed, for their parent, their friend, their family member to read and understand that, like, yes, this person has to go gluten free. Here's how you support them because it's strict, and here's why it's strict. But also, they're dealing with a little bit of an emotional turmoil. They're dealing with a big life transition in realizing, like, dating is going to be impacted, my marriage might be impacted, having kids might be impacted. Like, there's a lot of noise that comes up. And so I really wanted to illustrate that in the book, not being like, I'm not a mental health practitioner, but I do work a lot with my clients on mindset and have had my own mindset journey of just realizing that, like, healing and dealing with autoimmune does have to go beyond the food. We're not robots who can just eat a restrictive diet and then just go on our way. Like, it impacts quality of life. And for lack of better words, like, SHIT comes up when that's happening.
I actually believe with people, I tell my clients and people that I don't think you can not talk to people about some sort of either mental health or mental thoughts around food. It either evokes really great memories or people are coming to you for help to eat healthier because they have some sort of mental block, or they think they can't do something, or they need help because something's going on with them.
Totally. We've really, food has rituals just driven in kind of our childhood. There's so much in terms of the stories we've created around food. Like, I'm going to look at chocolate and think a certain thing about like when I used to make chocolate chip cookies with my grandmother, and like the fact that I enjoy having it after dinner. And then someone else is going to look at chocolate and have a totally different experience mentally with it.
Or evoke some horrible childhood memory of getting sick from having too much. You never really know people. So you decided to manage your celiac, like you got past it. You had a turning point. What are some of the ways, like how did you start to manage it and come out of whatever, I don't know if you want to call it darkness, mental fog, just decided to change, I guess?
Yeah. My lowest point with celiac was when I actually had to take medical leave from work. So this was about 6 years ago or so that my therapist at the time was the only person who really knew what was going on. And I was losing more weight. I just like wasn't able to tolerate a lot of foods. I was dealing with a lot of bloating, and just overall like fatigue and sick and unwell, and really, my mental state was in a really unhealthy place around food. And she was the one at the time who was like, I don't think anyone else knows what's going on like you and I do. And, you need to stop everything and take care of yourself and be your own advocate. And at the time, I was that person who was like the go, go, go type A, I'm going to do all the things woman, like so many of us are, especially in New England. And I didn't want to listen. I mean, she told me that for months before I finally listened, because I was so sick that I finally had to take medical leave, had to do some testing at the hospital, had a lot of nutrient deficiencies I was working with. And that was a turning point for me. Like, I had to actually ask my parents for help, someone in their 20s, where I was like, I don't want to do this. I'm living on my own in Boston. Like, I don't want to have to be this person. But I took 2 weeks off and really took time to pull back and say, okay, your body's giving you feedback, Meg, and you need to start listening instead of fighting it and just thinking that like the fight is going to get you to a happy, end. And it's not. That's not what life is about. And so from that point, I think that I was able to move forward and really look at like, who are my support systems, me being one of them, but also things like my acupuncturist, some of my other holistic healers, my chiropractor, my family, my friends, and like, how can I use them and actually ask for support that I need, rather than just fighting it and thinking I can do it all alone. And what that did was also helped to heal some of my headspace just right then and there around the disease, by being able to be in receiving mode of like, I can receive and I am worthy of receiving some support and help from people. And I think I just realized too, like, I am someone, and I'm curious if you feel this way, when you deal with autoimmune, it's like, you're not, this might feel discouraging for some, but I think it can be empowering if you have the right headspace. You're not ever fully done with the healing process. Like, you should acknowledge that like regular visits to your acupuncturist, if that feels good, is important. Regular commitment for me to stillness and meditation is really important and serves me. Regular movement really serves me. It feels good. Making time to be in nature and off of my phone really feels good. And just like someone without autoimmune, a lot of those things are things we need to like refuel our cup in a natural, more primal way. But I think I had to acknowledge that like, okay, it's not that you're going to just check the box and then be able to X this out of your life and you're done with it. It doesn't have to be me. It's not who I am, but it's a part of me, and it's something that I can work with rather than work against.
Yeah, I think people don't realize that even though you have a disease and you seem like you're well, that I go through times where things are definitely not well for me, or I may have a really, really bad day. And it's through no fault of my own that I've done this. I haven't done anything to myself. It's just something happens and my body's angry, or the weather impacts me in some way. but I also have to go through yearly screenings. I go to the doctor every 3 months. I have screenings every 6 months. I have blood work every few months. And I think people think that, well, what do you just go once a year to be checked up? Like everyone goes for their yearly exam. I'm like, no, not quite.
Yeah, it's different.
I mean, I get stuck in an MRI so much, I think I should get frequent flyer miles from it.
Oh, good Lord. Yeah, that's not fun. That's not
I get
fun.
about 6 a year now. So, they repeat.
Wow.
Well, I get 3 of them every 6 months because I can't do them all back to back because otherwise I'd be in there for like 3 hours, and I don't think anyone wants to be in a metal tube for 3 hours.
No.
I don't know about you, but like, I don't know. So, like you must go through blood work and you must go through all kinds of tests every couple of months to make sure your nutrition's right, make sure your body's functioning properly, right?
Yeah, celiac is interesting because you can really, what at least we're seeing in the research is you can regrow those little finger-like projections and really appear kind of like a typical normal healthy person. I don't like to use the word normal, but just like a healthy person without celiac, if you adhere to a gluten-free diet. But there is some nuance in the research there, and my personal opinion, I mean, this could be, I'm not sure how like accurate this opinion is, but my personal opinion is there are non-responsive celiacs because there are people where the stress can debilitate and affect their gut on a deeper level, or kind of incongruence with the fact that gluten is having this autoimmune reaction, so they have a harder time really healing. So I think it's an interesting conversation because autoimmune in general, I think that autoimmune people more than others are deeply impacted by stress and less resilient to the effects of stress. So it's interesting to look at like why one person with celiac would appear healed versus another. I feel very strongly that resilience is built through consistent stress management support, through things like meditation, breath work. This is different for everyone, but this is something I go a little bit deeper into with every client so that they can really feel empowered around these tools that we have inside our body to regulate that system.
Now, Meg, I'm going to ask you a question and hold on to your thoughts about it because we have to pay some bills and let one of our sponsors play their promo. Now, just because it's gluten-free does not necessarily mean it's good for you. Now, think about your answer, and we'll be right back with this message from Liz Teresa.
Hi, I'm Liz Teresa. I help women launch and build online businesses they love.
I needed to give my brand a web presence, but I didn't speak tech. Enter Liz Teresa. With lightning speed, she got the essence of my brand. Her guidance notes, her tips were practical and concrete.
She's the #1 person in my life. I'm so happy she came to me.
So thank you, Liz Teresa. I am so excited to keep working with you.
And we are back with the lovely Meg Gerber and our functional dietitian friend who we are learning so much about, and about celiac and autoimmune diseases. And I asked her a question before the break. And I asked her, just because it's gluten-free, it doesn't necessarily mean it's good for you. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I love this question because you are so right. It is definitely something that, especially since my diagnosis almost 10 years ago, it's really, it's a huge market now, and there can be a lot of really processed gluten-free foods. And in fact, sometimes I find that like the gluten-free cupcakes or, cakes and baked goods and things are almost worse nutritionally than the original because they're overcompensating for the lack of gluten, and they're adding in more sugar or like more just, junky ingredients. So it's interesting. Yes, you can totally live a very nourishing, healthy lifestyle eating gluten-free, but I like to tell people, go for the OGs of gluten-free food, i.e. the things that don't need a label. Like potatoes were gluten-free all along, sweet potatoes, root veggies, fruits, beans, like these things were gluten-free all along, and you don't need a label to identify that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, like everyone else, sometimes you want cereal in the morning, or somebody wants, there's some really great seeded crackers or something to eat with your rice or whatever. But there's people that are always like, oh, this is a gluten-free cupcake. And I'm like, well, what exactly is in it? How much sugar?
Mm-hmm.
What, like I need to know before what else I'm eating too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Totally. I mean, I like to give people like a little fiber sugar rule when they are picking up a packaged food. So I like to say 3 grams or more of fiber per serving. And this is very much like a less is more, but 6 grams or less of sugar, just to give people like a ratio of like lower single digits of sugar, higher digits of fiber. Because of course, like I'm a human too. Sometimes we have to just get packaged items. Sometimes we're traveling. And ideally, yes, a whole foods diet for autoimmune is incredible, but I definitely have some things in my pantry that are packaged where it's like, we have to be realistic, and like I love a cracker with hummus, for example.
Yeah. I have plenty of I have a couple of crackers in my pantry, and I have some cereal for those mornings when I'm really lazy, or gluten-free bread to toast up, or some avocado toast for a quick snack in the morning, or whatever. I think everybody does. Just because you're gluten-free or eat gluten-free doesn't mean that everything that's made is bad for you.
Totally, totally. I'm curious if you have any favorite gluten-free breads, because I always get this question and I'm like diehard to only eat 2.
Honestly, I've been testing out new brands lately because I've been trying to find ones that are lower in sodium and lower in sugar and don't have all kinds of really weird stuff in them. So right now I've been trying ones from a brand called Bakehouse.
Oh, okay. I don't know that one.
So I don't know if they are everywhere yet, but I've been trying some different ones from them right now.
Have you tried Simple Needs or Bread Seriously?
No, I don't know them.
Okay, they're awesome. So Simple Needs is great for like an avocado toast. They're like a bigger slice of bread, which I'm sure you understand this. Like most gluten-free breads, we get gypped in the size for whatever reason.
This big.
Like, yeah, it's like why do people think that gluten-free people want to eat less? We still want to eat. So I like the Simple Needs because it's a bigger slice and it's great for like a sandwich or a piece of toast. You do have to order them online, but it is so incredibly worth it. The ingredients are amazing, super whole food ingredients. It's actually a yeast-free bread too, so that's kind of nice because some of my clients have yeast struggles. And then Bread Seriously is like what I remember a chewy, yummy sourdough tasting like.
Ooh.
So really, really, like you'll read the ingredient list, Ashley, and you'll be like, I know all these ingredients. I feel great about this. They're out of San Francisco, and I have ordered them for years. I mean, they make these yummy dinner rolls that like are just delicious dipped into a soup. I cannot recommend them enough.
Well, I mean, sourdough out of San Francisco, it has to be good, of course.
Yeah.
So that is a great tip. Now, I want to ask you, you've had all these difficulties, you've had ups, you've had downs, things are good. Now, how has it changed your life for the better and for the worse?
For the better, it has given me a deeper level of empathy with my clients than I would have ever had. I think that you don't truly know what people are going through unless you like live through that experience yourself. And so, really understanding how gut issues and autoimmune can play a deeply impactful role on people's quality of life. I am grateful for the gift that that's given me, because it's giving me, it really has given me a connection with people that I wouldn't have ever had. And it led me down a path, which is funny to say as a dietitian, but it led me down a path of going beyond the food and acknowledging that it's more than just the food. And so the deeper commitment I now have as a yoga teacher to yoga, meditation, and breath work as well has been a really beautiful, eye-opening experience that, as someone with a science background, some of it is really hard for me to understand, even myself, to be like, something that I'm feeling is happening, but I just can't really explain it, but I know I feel better. And for me, yoga has always been that. Like I can go into the class and feel just low energy or stomach pain, and I leave feeling better, especially just specifically in like a stretching, gentle flow yoga class. And so that just has felt like a magical secret sauce thing for me, that like I've had that experience, and I realize maybe not everyone has that experience, but I like to help my clients identify like what practices for regulating their nervous system will support them, that they can then feel like over time they're building this toolkit, because autoimmune isn't this perfect linear journey. Many times we have some bumps in the road, even when we're, a seasoned practitioner, and it can feel really supportive to know, okay, I have these things in my toolbox. I know what foods I can fall back on. And for me, I think I told you, and we're going to be talking about it today too, tiger nut flour was something I found in my autoimmune journey when I was doing a more restrictive therapeutic diet to heal after that period of taking time off of work. And I now really have expanded so much of my diet, but I still love to eat tiger nut flour in my baked good recipes because it just feels really good in my body. So having like those fallback recipes, having fallback practices, and knowing what supplements or herbs work for me is that's something that has been a beautiful realization in the experience. And it's allowed me to really in real time create and build that for my clients, which has been incredible. And it allows people to take their power back in the experience and not feel like they're out of options. There's always options. I think the second part of your question of like, what has it affected for like maybe the worst or like the negative side of things, I think it's still what comes up for me is travel. Like I would love to be the laissez-faire person, especially now in, virtual times, who could just be like, I'm going to work anywhere. I'm going to be a nomad. And like, it's just not super realistic for me. I totally can travel and can plan ahead and enjoy my experience. But I have realized that like my most restorative travel experiences are when I had the luxury, which this has only been very few times in my life, the luxury of like gluten-free meals made and served to me, whether that's at a resort or whether that's like a chef is doing it. The retreat that I hosted for women last year, I co-hosted a retreat for 20 women in California, and we had a private chef that was certified gluten-free. And the lack, like it just was such low stress for me to be there, even as a host, even as a facilitator, to be able to just be like, I'm going to show up and these meals are just safe and I don't have to spend any mental energy on my food, was really, really a wonderful thing and such a gift.
I always find that my friends, they've always deferred to me because, I'm me. I work in the food industry and I know people. And so everyone's always deferred to me, like when we go out to dinner. But sometimes it's because like I need to find someplace I can eat. So, I'm like, here's option A or option B. You pick one. And, but like, I'm going to be traveling in the next few months. And for me, it's always about doing research, where I go, what I do. And I get it. Like, then I'm thinking like, I'm going to be on the plane. Like, what am I going to eat on the plane? Like, what do I do?
I am such a food packer. I mean, my friends laugh at me, but I do my thing, and I bring my gelatin gummies with me that I make homemade because I love those for my gut, especially with travel. They're great for people prone to constipation. I'll bring like a tiger nut muffin and maybe like a hard-boiled egg or a meat jerky stick. Like I really try to stay in somewhat alignment with how I like to eat, which is like getting more protein density and getting carbs, getting healthy fats. And so, yes, things may be a little more packaged when you're traveling on a plane, but I like to really pack and build sort of meals that work for me, so that I'm not like on the go frantic thinking like, oh my God, all I can eat right now is this like package of nuts or candy in this random store, this random convenience store. So I think if I were to choose a word of like how a celiac or an autoimmune person supports themselves with travel, it is some planning.
Yeah, let's just hope everyone likes the plan, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's more mental energy for sure. I would say too, if someone feels overwhelmed, I do try to share this on my social media in real time for people all the time. Like, what am I bringing when I'm traveling? Or here's some ideas, or what are my travel tips? Because I get it, like it's mental energy. And so the more that I can support people with that, since I'm living through it and doing it and making food all the time, I'm happy to help.
I think that's a great tip. So now you guys hear that? Like, I'm going to go straight to Meg's social media after this and like find all of her traveling stories so that I can figure out what to pack for me in a few months. Now, what brought you to writing this book? You said it's something that you have out, which I got a preview of an ebook of hers, and it's gorgeous. The photos are beautiful. There's recipes in there that I would definitely eat all the time. What brought you to come to wanting to write the book, like other than something that you never had before?
Yeah, I know. Even looking back, I'm like, wow, I can't believe I did that because I'm not a trained chef like you are. I definitely do not call myself a chef. I enjoy cooking, and I kind of just out of the experience of trying to figure out what to eat and what worked for my body, it was kind of a naturally born experience for me. And I found that one of my favorite ways to socialize and connect with people was having people over for food. So I was like, or having them over for dinner. So I was like, I need to figure out recipes that taste good, not only for me, but for the people around me, because I'm such a social being and I love to just share food with people. So I found that a couple of years into the business that I own now, I had this whole list of recipes that were kind of like, some of them were online, some of them were scrabbled in a notebook. And I was like, I, for my own reasons, would love to have these in one collective place of the things that I'm making all the time. But for my clients, this would be a beautiful resource. And so originally I was like, I'm basically just going to make a cookbook. It's going to be a gluten-free cookbook. And then as I got into the creative kind of flow state process with it, I realized this needs to be about taking a diagnosis that feels restrictive in nature and how I've created this lens of how I view it, which is a mindset of abundance of like, look at all this stuff that you can have that makes you feel well, that supports your body, supports your gut. So I started sort of writing about just my story and where I started and my symptoms and how I did start to go beyond the food and recognize the emotional aspects of celiac. And I found in that experience, like, okay, there really needs to be more of a rule book, a handbook for celiac in a different way than the typical like clinical view of celiac. Because I found that a lot of the books that say like my mom had gotten when I first got diagnosed were just very clinical. Again, kind of treating people like robots of just like, okay, you just got to eat this way and get these lab tests done every couple of months and that's it. And there's so much more in how it even impacts like dating, for example. Like you technically shouldn't kiss someone who's just eating gluten. You have to tell them to swish their mouth out or ideally brush their teeth. And it's like, these things are silly, but also like they impact your quality of life. Like that came up for me a lot of my 20s when I was dating. So I wanted to put all of that in one place where it's like, this is sort of your handbook, rule book, share it with family members so you feel less alone in the world or friends. And also I kind of just infused it with some of my gut healing tips and like favorite gut healing foods so that the person who maybe is supporting their celiac family member or friend also gets a benefit. Because I think so many people, and I wonder if you feel this way, but I just feel like everyone has gut issues these days with the way our food system is and stress. And so really, even though this is a very niche cookbook, I kind of wanted to have a little bit for everybody in the sense that like stuff tastes good and there's some gut healing tips in that kind of back area of the book.
Now, you also talk about the mind-body connection, like to our gut, and you also talk about the microbiome, which I don't think a lot of people understand what that is, which I think is a lot of good information.
Yeah. So your gut microbiome is basically the collection of cells lining all the way from like mouth to anus. So what's interesting about that is someone who has, say, ulcerative colitis, which is just defined to the colon, that's a GI condition. Someone who has Crohn's, which can be anywhere in the GI tract, could just have something going on in the mouth or the esophagus, which is just kind of fascinating to think about because I think we always think like intestines is our gut or stomach is our gut, but it's everything starting from the mouth. So I even ask my own clients, like, have you had a lot of dental surgeries or dental infections or things going on in the mouth? Because the swallowing of those things can totally affect things lower down in the chain within the gut. And really, it is the hone of our immune system. It has such a big impact on how you fight off things like colds, flu, COVID. But I think that it's only more in the last like 5 to 7 years or so been recognized, and we've had the literature to support like why the gut microbiome and supporting it is so important. I know that when I was early in my journey seeing a GI doctor, I was asking like, what can I eat to feel better? And this isn't a knock to GI doctors, because there's some that are great, but I've seen this in my clinical experience with clients that like their GI doctor is like, well, food doesn't matter. And of course it matters. It's going down the same tube that you're going to put that same medication down that they're giving you. So there's so much to the gut microbiome. There's so much that I can talk about. I would say like the 3 main food categories that I highlight in the cookbook are great places to start if you're feeling overwhelmed around like, what do I even do for my gut health? Because so many of us are under eating fiber, and that is a really important place to start, to just look at like, how am I eating fiber? And then how can I do it in a way that serves my gut? Because someone with gut issues who's really inflamed may not do well with a lot of raw veggies or raw fruit, for example. They may do better with gentler, cooked, warmed foods. So it is about, again, taking it away from the textbook and looking really at the client of what will serve them. But in the mind-gut connection aspect of things, I sort of give a little snippet of the deeper work I do with clients by introducing my rule of 3s in the cookbook. And that is my 3 times per meal breathwork practice that essentially initiates this process of rest and digest, which is your parasympathetic side of your nervous system. So you have the sympathetic, fight or flight, and then you have the parasympathetic, where rest and digest happens. And so many of us are living in that sympathetic high stress state. And what happens there is our blood sugar goes up, our blood pressure goes up, we totally shut down blood flow to the digestive tract, things really slow down digestively, things stop moving as well. And so, recognizing that calming your system and being present at meals can go a really long way. And I love the science of, so there's a study that says 20% of our digestive juices are upregulated by just engaging in the brain phase or cephalic phase of eating. So what that means is like just getting present at your meal, starting to smell things, starting to see and look at what's on your plate, getting out of like, I was in a work meeting or I was fighting with my partner, like just getting in the zone of, I'm having my meal, I'm being present, I'm going to notice the mouthfeel of the food, I'm going to notice the smell, up-regulates that symphony of digestive enzyme output, stomach acid to break down your protein, even salivary enzymes in the mouth that start to break down carbohydrates. So that is one of the most important starting practices, say for the person who has really they have stress and they have gut issues. And I say, you have a stressed gut. That is an important place to start. That rule of 3 is 3 breaths 3 times during a meal. Start your breath with those 3 deep breaths. And you don't need to exaggerate it. This doesn't need to be a hugely long routine. I like this because it's very accessible. We're going to be eating meals anyway, so you might as well just slow down, take a step back, sit down, breathe, think about chewing, think about swallowing. You're doing your gut a favor by doing all of those things.
I mean, I did think about that the other day when I was eating. I'm sitting there going, okay, wait, her book said to pay attention to it and smell it and look at it, as I'm thinking, oh God, I only have this much time to eat. What am I gonna, I had to be somewhere. So I was I'm no, wait, I gotta stop and think about this. So this advice was something I was thinking about. I'm let's see what happens if you sit and you think about it. And it actually does make you more aware of what you're eating, and you're not just oh wait, what did I just eat? And I think that's a great thing for people to learn. Now you have a delicious recipe that you are going to show us. So what are you making today, Meg?
Yeah. So you guys are in my kitchen with me to make this recipe. So we are making out of the cookbook, and I would love to show them just the recipe in the book as well. I've made these already a bunch of times, so there's a little scribble scrabble on my page, but we're going to be making the salted banana chocolate chip muffins. And these are a tiger nut muffin, like I had mentioned to you. And you had told me, are you experienced with working with tiger nut flour?
I haven't done much work with it, actually. I've done different nut flours and I've done different things, but tiger nut flour is a little bit newer to me. But I'm always in love with a good banana bread or banana muffin. I love my bananas.
Yeah, I mean, I think you just can't go wrong with doing a banana bread. It's such a crowd favorite, crowd pleaser. I love this recipe because there's no added sweetener. It's just sweetened with bananas. And that's kind of my goal with people with baked goods, with my clients, but also with myself, is that I found in my journey, I really wanted and enjoyed the nostalgia of a baked good, but I wanted something that worked for my body that really felt good. So this is a great recipe because it is no added sugar and it's prebiotic fiber rich thanks to the tiger nut flour. So what I'm doing now is
explain to us what the tiger nut flour is, not
yes,
because I don't think everyone knows that.
Yeah, so tiger nut flour is a root vegetable. So it's basically, they're like teeny tiny, they almost look like nuts, but they're nut free. So the beauty of that is that it's a very allergen friendly root vegetable that's ground up into a flour. And I found it during my autoimmune journey, mostly because I was actually struggling to not only with, things that had gluten in them, but I was struggling with a lot of the keto movement where there was a lot of the really fatty, nutty products. Like my gut was having a hard time digesting a lot of almond flour based things and whatnot. So I found tiger nut flour in that journey. And I've loved it ever since because it has a natural sweetness to it. What I'm doing now with it is I'm just sifting it through a fine mesh sieve. There's probably a better way to sift, but I kind of just, use this little metal sieve, sift out the 2 cups of flour that are in the recipe, and great for the gut microbiome because it has that fiber density, but I just love that it has the natural sweetness as well. So you don't need to add any sweetener, especially since we're using the banana, which is just so naturally sweet on its own. Do you want me to explain kind of what I'm throwing into the recipe?
Yeah, just tell us what you're doing as you're going.
Cool. So I have pre-measured some baking soda and some baking powder. So super simple. I would just say as a reminder, celiacs need to be cautious that some brands are not labeled gluten-free of those. So for example, I use this one, the Bob's Red Mill. Is it okay that I'm talking about?
Yeah, you can talk about brands. It's totally fine.
Cool. So Bob's Red Mill, you'll see it's labeled GF, labeled gluten-free for people. So I'm using that brand of the baking soda. So we're just throwing baking soda, baking powder, and then I'm putting some cinnamon in here. So half a teaspoon of cinnamon is what the recipe calls for. You can also get, for people like you who are, a chef and creative in their own right, I think this recipe is really beautiful with cardamom as well. So you can totally change it up and just do cardamom instead of the cinnamon. This is a cinnamon nutmeg combo. It's faint. It's not super strong. I feel like the banana is the winner of the flavor profile here. And then I'm adding about a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. So I'm using a Celtic Gray sea salt. So this is the brand that I like. I work a lot with clients on minerals because mineral deficiency is more common than ever. Things like sodium, potassium, magnesium, calcium, because of the status of our soil. Our soil health is not what it used to be about even 20 years ago or so because of monocrop agriculture. So we now have this soil that is far less nutrient dense, mainly because it used to have this beautiful dense microbiome and innate capacity to it. And that in itself was wrapped up with minerals. So the minerals would then translate to our food. So our minerals in our food are lower than ever. And I will say, just as someone who tests minerals in practice, they do hair mineral testing, people are lower than ever. Levels are low. So I like to add high quality salt to my food, like this Celtic Gray salt, which is derived from the sea, very, very well-sourced, no heavy metals. This is a great product to use for just general salting in your home or in recipes. And then I had pre-mashed some banana for this recipe. So it calls for 3 large bananas. For someone who's being extra mindful of their sugar, they can use a less overripe banana. I like to do a combo of 1 really overripe, 1 kind of or the 2 others like a little less ripe. Maybe they just started to spot, so it's not like super, super sweet for those of us who maybe are a little more sugar sensitive. If you're working with people who like really want it to taste sweet, since we're not adding any other sugar, they could do, you know, overripe, super overripe. But yes, it has 3 large bananas, so it's a pretty significant amount of banana in there. And then we are cracking and adding in 2 eggs, okay? And I absolutely just have to, like, little plug for these eggs that I'm using. There's a local farm that has a little farm stand near me, and they just have the most beautiful orangest yolks you've ever seen. Can you see that?
Oh yeah, farm fresh eggs are so
Yeah.
Sometimes there are a few different colors. I got you beat. Other than a farm, my friend has chickens.
Oh, what a win. That's such a win. Ugh, I'm so jealous. That's amazing. We are just adding the eggs into the banana. So I like to just add, you know, obviously kind of mix the wet together. I'm whisking it. I like to have the banana be like even a little bit chunky.
Yeah.
Personally, some people like it to be a little bit more thinned out, but that's how I like it. And then I have some melted coconut oil here. So this is a 1/4 cup of melted coconut oil. Definitely using an organic, cold pressed coconut oil is important. I also would say this recipe is just delicious with, if you do well with a grass-fed butter or a ghee. It's really, really yummy with either of those. You can kind of taste that buttery, like salted ghee flavor in this. So if somebody likes that, I would highly recommend that. And then I'm just going to combine the wet into the dry ingredients with my whisk. I mean, this recipe is super simple. Like, it's pretty minimal ingredients. I like that it has eggs. I tolerate eggs well. I would say for the person who doesn't tolerate eggs well, you can try, I haven't tried this myself, so they could try doing like a gelatin egg or a flax egg. Do you do okay with eggs?
Well, at the moment, eating eggs, not so much, but baking with them, fine.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, actually, that's pretty common. I see that actually pretty often.
It's the proteins, which people don't
practice.
realize. And if you ever want a tip to get your bananas absolutely perfect when you're trying to mash them for muffins or things,
Oh yeah,
get
please.
your potato masher.
Oh yeah, I love that tip. That's such a good
It
tip.
comes out absolutely perfect, and you still get
Yeah.
a few little chunks, but they mix so well into the wet ingredients.
Oh, that's so smart. I love that. Thank you for that tip. I'm totally going to use that. I'm going to steal that from you. So we're pretty much done here. So essentially I just add in a 1/3 cup of a dark chocolate chip. Now, somebody could leave that out and they could do walnuts if they like that better, or they could just do plain banana if they don't want anything.
My favorite brand.
Yeah. Do you use this brand?
Oh my God, I snack on them. I bake with them. I love them.
I love this brand. I love that, like, these chips are relatively new, and I love that they came out with these because the ingredients are literally organic cacao, organic date, organic cocoa butter, and vanilla bean. Like, that's it. So it's just being sweetened with date. So this is wonderful for anybody who's just trying to be mindful of, like, if you're a chocolate lover, but you're trying to be mindful of that extra added sugar. I also like the brand Pasha because they have a completely unsweetened chocolate chip. That's just 100% cacao. That is an option if you were, if you were the person who likes that flavor of chocolate, but likes almost just the bitterness and doesn't want the sweet.
I don't want to interrupt you too much, but can we see the final product? Because we have
Yes, ma'am, you
30
can.
seconds or so.
So I have some ready here for us.
So
I wish that I could send the smell through the page, Ashley. If only
I
we could create
know.
that.
I wish I could try them, but they look so good. I can't
They're
wait.
super, super yummy. And they also, you can make them into a bread too. So in the cookbook, I have the muffin version, but you could do the same temperature for 40 minutes if you were to bake it in a loaf pan.
That sounds amazing. Now, everyone, Meg, can you tell us where to get your book?
Yes, they can get my book on Amazon.com. It's How to Glow, gluten-free. This is what the cookbook looks like. Yeah. And they can find it on my website too, which you linked so beautifully in here. And they can follow me on @GroundedNourish on Instagram.
Perfect. Meg, thank you so much for being on. This was so much fun, and I can't wait to catch up on everything else you're doing over time. You have a lovely evening, and
you too, Ashley.
I'm
Thank
going
you.
to say goodbye for tonight.
Thanks, Ashley. I appreciate you. Have a great night.
I appreciate you too. Wasn't that lovely, everyone? All right, so we went a little long tonight, so I'm just going to have to say goodbye to you guys here, and hopefully you guys will all tune in next week.